What if there was a church that had as their first and most fervent focus the adoration of God's Son? That Jesus Christ and worshiping Him was all that mattered? And what if there was a church that believed that the fields were truly ripe to harvest and that the gospel was sufficient and had the power so that anyone who believed in the gospel could be saved? Wouldn't that be an awesome church? Jesus is the chief shepherd of his church. Therefore, he appoints his sheep to be shepherded, and the shepherds don't get the say of where they're to be sent. And so I remember very vividly a prayer that I came to laughingly regret, which was bowing a knee saying, I will go where your people need to be shepherded.
You're praying for a place you don't know. Sacramento was like, Scott definitely did not want to go to Sacramento. The desires just started to shift. And so then you're in Sacramento and it's like, it's all that makes sense now.
So the very thing that I didn't want to come back to was the very area that the Lord wanted me to minister in. And when I could get my mind around that, that's when there was a peace that started to settle in. The reason we went to Rayleigh's is because Rayleigh's was all we could afford. You know, it was free, so something we could pay for. The Little Bliss Cakery, that's where we started, and we had a couple meetings. It wasn't gonna be a long-term destination. It was about how do we find some sort of regularity. I was just hoping that wouldn't fill up with family members, and that's it.
I came in, and Scott was there with Aaron, and a little roll-up sign that said Harvest Bible Chapel, and he just talked about what the church would be like. And as I sat there for that hour, I was like, yeah, this is something special.
There was an awesome, just very committed core group of people who just loved Jesus deeply. And God used that core group and that foundation and a really young guy to build something that's just been amazing to be a part of.
It was definitely weird to walk into the high school because we did a couple preview services before, but especially that first week to walk in the high school and realize I used to eat lunch in here and now I'm gonna preach the gospel. Looking back, that's pretty awesome. At the time, I was just like, Lord, help me just be faithful to what you're calling me to.
Setting up and tearing down in that old high school auditorium and just wondering, Lord, what are you doing? What's going to be the fruit of this? But then as you slowly, weeks turn into months and become years, you start to see that the Lord works through broken and weak vessels.
But as time went on and it went from 80, 90 people on a service and it went to 150, you could really see what God was doing and that he was building his church to bring glory to him.
When we got into talks about how at a high school, where we were only allowed to do Sunday services, would we be able to continue to expand and maybe have a third service and ask for more classrooms? Right about then is when I was like, we really need to find something.
Just felt like week to week it was uncertain until finally it was about 4 weeks away. And to celebrate the opening of that in November of 2019, it was such a humbling experience to see the Lord bring that to fruition.
And we moved into this building just prior to COVID hitting.
Nobody had ever been through a pandemic before. And so we felt a serious sense to contend for the faith of the gospel, contend for the word of God.
We needed to honor and glorify God by uplifting Jesus to be the head of our church. And so from that, he had a foundation to be able to entrust more souls to our care.
We had our church outside and we had a lot of growth and it was great. But the thing that I love the most is that it's never been about the numbers that we have at this church. It's still been about the gospel.
I never cared about the numbers, but I was never also going to be the person that goes, well, once we do this, we're gonna hunker down and never do anything else besides that. It's gonna be this number or whatever that bar was. I always just wanted to be, if the Lord was drawing someone to our church to be cared for.
We just realized that Doxa was a breath of fresh air because At the time, there was a lot of confusion. It just helped to come here and be reminded of who God is and what he's about, and that he's sovereign over it all. And regardless of all the craziness that was happening during those several years, God is in control.
From the beginning to the end, it was about Jesus. Being such a big church, that was very impressionable to me. So there was some kind of connection that was happening.
Regardless of what pastor's preaching, we're hearing the gospel presented.
Seeing the lost saved is important, and so we're going to take risks. And so we're going to do big things, not because they're big for us, but because they're what God's putting before us to do. And in faithfulness, remembering that the church is the people of God that gather together for the celebration and the exaltation of his name. And so really wanting in everything we do, again, the endeavors may be big at times, but it's because of the mission of God for saving his people, bringing them to himself. And that's just what gets us as pastors up each and every week to continue to teach and to preach and to shepherd, to counsel. All that we're seeking to do to make disciples is for the people, for the glory of God.
The road ahead, what's your main prayer for the church as a pastor?
That they would love Jesus, that would look to Jesus for everything. Never go too far without taking a glance at Jesus. Everything else is extras and cherries on top, but when Jesus is first and he's loved and cherished and you're enjoying that communion that you can have with the triune God, I think that's all I could ever want. That's the preparation for heaven. Ultimately, that's the goal. It's like, I want to prepare our people for heaven. And there's a lot of endeavors. We need to make up ground for the Great Commission around the world, right? But it's not less than loving Jesus. And out of that overflow, all other things in ministry take place.